a Heroes Welcome podcast. Welcome back, listeners, for another episode of a Heroes Welcome podcast. I'm your co-host, Maria Laquerre-Diego, and I'm here with my ever well-read co-host.
That's me, Princess Liliana. I'm still adapting that name because I liking it. I'm just kidding. This is Liliana Baylon. I'm an LMFT, and we're here with Vanessa. Vanessa, how do you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Hello, everyone. My name is Vanessa Pezo. I am a trauma therapist and I'm based in Long Beach, California. I'm a Latina. I am Mexican on my mom's side and Ecuadorian on my dad's side. And I am the author of an upcoming book, The Latinx Guide to Liberation, Healing from Historical, Generational, and Individual Trauma, that is coming out today, right? February 21, 2025, when everyone will be hearing this.
Yes. So please, as soon as you hear this, go get the book. Like I mentioned, I had the privilege of reading the book before it went out, and I just couldn't stop talking about it. I share with Vanessa, I share with Maria, and I truly love the work that you did on this book. So thank you.
Thank you.
You know it's important if Liliana's reaching directly out to the author of a book because she reads a lot of books and she does not contact all of the authors. So you know it's an important read for her when she does that and then is quick to share it with the rest of our group. So this is a book that needs to be on your radar, and this is someone that you need to know about.
That's right. So everyone is doing. Vanessa has a Maria too. Vanessa has a big platform in social media, but if you do not know, we will include all her social media so that you can contact her. But yeah, Vanessa is amazing in what she's posting online. Vanessa, tell us a little bit about your book. If you wanted to describe it, how will you describe it?
It's really a book for Latinos. And so I actually open it up. The dedication is I do dedicate it to all of my fellow Latinos who have ever struggled to feel like they are enough.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's really who I'm targeting this towards, my fellow Latinos who have had maybe similar and different experiences, such as mine growing up in the US, and have had to navigate all of the complexities around identity and belonging and enoughness. I hope to just give background and information that helps us make a little bit more sense of our experience and take off some of that individual pressure that it's this individual problem if you don't feel like you fit in or you don't feel like you're validated, and open it up to a bigger perspective that shows us that a lot of that's by design and where it comes from and how it impacts us.
Love that you jump in there because the chapter Twice as Perfect. When I started reading it, which is not for Maria that she has not read it, but she's going to get her copy soon. When you talk about the chapter and you use the movie clip of Selena, I started laughing. So Maria, have you ever watched the Selena movie?
Yes, of course.
Okay. There is a clip. Is it okay if we talk about it?
Of course.
Okay. So in the movie where Selena is going to give a concert, she was excited. She wants to go give a concert in Mexico, and they realize that Selena does not speak Spanish. Welcome to all of us who do not have a perfect Spanish because we've been living in the US for so long. And her dad, I forgot the actor's name who portrays
Edward James Olmos.
Thank you. He goes, twice as perfect. How we have to be perfect enough here in the US and not have an accent and speak perfect English. And then when we go to our country of origin, not just Mexico, then we need to have the perfect Spanish, because if not, we're just never enough. So the idea of twice as perfect, it's something that all of us who are Latino therapists in the US, or just Latinos, period, feel that pressure. It's one of our core, like we have to be enough in both worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I when I was writing that chapter, I thought, like, what is something like an example of this? Because there's other terms people use, like something people will say, like, ni de aquí, ni de allá, and that kind of has its own sentiment and energy. But I have always just thought that the way he puts it there of having to be, he goes, we have to be more Mexican than the Mexicans and more American than the Americans. And this double-sided pressure that's so intense that we feel. And then you often are like, well, I don't measure up in either.
Yes. Right. And even when you said it, I don't measure up in neither. Like the drop that we all can get familiar, either because you can identify it or apply it as gender inequality. If you're female and you're just not enough. If it's whatever, it applies in so many levels, not just in ethnicity. But you're absolutely right. That was like something that I started laughing because I identified. And then it was like laughing, crying. I was like, that's right. Will I ever be enough? Will it ever be enough? Not enough Mexican, and not enough American, because it's always the other import. The other chapter that I really enjoy, and I'm going not in chronological order, is the migration stories matter. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yes. So I have a chapter in the book called Immigration Stories Matter. And the idea around it is that in the United States, and especially now, we have these narratives around immigrants, and people talk about immigrants obviously in a really negative, disrespectful, and dehumanizing way as people who come in and they're here to take, or they don't contribute to society, or, they are breaking laws, or, all of these different tropes and stereotypes that we have around immigration. And I've always wanted in my work with people to open up to bigger perspectives, not just on your individual experience and not just on your family experience, but like, what's the context that all of that happens within? And so I talk about the way that the United States has intervened in countries around the world, especially in Mexico and Latin America, through things like their economic policy, like NAFTA, the free trade agreement between Mexico and Canada, and also in their disruption of the political systems in other countries. So financing coups, backing right-wing militias, overthrowing governments, and how that actually leads to immigration. And so I think I have a line in the book that like eventually people realize that one of the best ways to avoid living in a society where the United States is going to come in and overthrow your government is that you then have to live in the United States. Yeah. That's one of the only ways to protect yourselves from it. And so people get like vilified as immigrants for wanting to come to the United States for safety, security, or resources, or for, a lot of other reasons. But why are they leaving home in the first place? Right? Most people would prefer to stay in the place that they have a connection to and a history in. But we have, and when I say we, I mean the United States, have made it where people are unable to do that. And so, there is this experience of really like forced migration where you are really unable to stay in the place that you've maybe had generations and generations and generations. And it's not necessarily your fault. The US plays a big role, yet we're the ones that get targeted and we're the ones that are made to be the problem.
Love it.
When Americans are immigrants themselves.
Yes.
I say as a white woman in the room, all right, we are immigrants. This was not our land.
Yeah, right.
Seems to be really convenient for us to forget that.
Yeah. And also the idea of, sometimes there's those sentiments, people who are anti-immigration will say, well, my ancestors came here the right way, like quote unquote, the right way. And so I do even talk a little bit in that chapter about how immigration policy changed over time and became more restrictive. And so sure, if you want to say your grandparents or great grandparents came the right way, what was the right way? They showed up, were let in, and there wasn't really any like narrative around being documented and undocumented. It wasn't until the immigrants were Black and brown and not white, basically, that all of a sudden we have this new narrative around the right way and create all of these systems and rules and visas and caps and quotas that we have the narrative from today.
Well, and you said it perfectly. We made them up.
Yeah.
The policies are made up based on a handful of people's preferences, beliefs, agendas, but they're made up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So go ahead.
I was super curious. I know that this is coming out, and a lot of us I feel like it's very timely, but clearly the work went into it before last month's events. But I'm wondering because writing a book is no joke. This is a labor of love.
Mhm.
Was there something in particular that like lit the fire for you to put pen to paper and put this out?
I think the book is really a collection of a lot of the things that I've been really fortunate to learn along the way through my own journey of healing, through my own education. And so I've been able to almost like collect information over time. And I always say to people, sometimes I will have an experience with one of my clients and I'll be like, oh my God, I'm so glad I took that class in community college 10 years ago, because now I know what they're talking about in this moment. Like things kind of unfold in a particular way. But one of the big motivators, or I would say like catalyst is maybe a better word. I had a couple of TikTok videos that did really well in maybe around like 2022-ish. And one of them was about acculturative stress, that like kind of twice as perfect pressure, and how for Latinx people, we would assume that coming to the US makes their life better in a lot of ways, and in some ways it does. But actually, it can be really harmful to our mental health when we live in the US. And there are some studies that show the longer we're here in the US, the worse our mental health outcomes get. And so I had made some videos about that, and I had a huge response, and people were relating to it so much, and it opened up so many conversations. And one thing people would ask me is, where can I learn more about this? And I would say, well, I mean, you can read like this book talks about this little bit of it, and this article, but it's kind of an academic article, but it talks a little bit about it. And, there was no one place I could send people that was written specifically for Latinos. And that was written for a general audience. A lot of it had come from more like textbooks and trainings in school and academic journals. And so I realized that there was a huge need for something that talked specifically to a Latinx audience about mental health, but that incorporated not just like that kind of like individual lens a lot of self-help is, but that really brought in the cultural pieces and the societal pieces and the historical pieces. And so when the opportunity arose and I met an editor with Jessica Kingsley Publisher, who's my publisher, I just said to myself, this opportunity presented itself to me and I should just take it. I should just run with it.
Yeah.
And it went fast, and it's going to go on fast ever since, but that's how it started.
Love that.
And I am so grateful for it. Because we do need, not only because of how you broke down the chapters, but not only just as Latinos, because we need to see representation, but because of what you just mentioned, which is there's no class that we can take in order to help us not only to make sense of what we're working with, but what do we name it? When in our training, proper trainings per se, we don't have this, we only have stereotypes. And what you did in your book is you humanize. And that's what we need. Can we be curious about the person in front of me that comes from Latin America or is just a newcomer? And then what is the difference when I'm working with one who is first generation versus second generation versus third generation? What you're just describing, right? Which is true. The third generation is dealing with higher levels of anxiety and depression. And most people will say, but why? Because you've been here the longer, you're separated from this generational trauma, but it's the other stressors that come with, some that we have mentioned. But it is true in regards to the longer that it stays, now that it gets better, maybe the financial piece, maybe we start building other stuff. Maybe you're not living with the cartels, but, we have other stuff dealing right now. Yet is the mental health piece in regards to the third generation and what they deal with that we don't get trained.
Yeah. That continues to be one of our talking points, Liliana, is that when we talk about diversity and we talk about different cultures, generally what we're given is stereotypes and not authentic experiences, and often not from from the population that we are talking about.
Yes.
Mhm.
So this is what I love. Because I started following you a while back. That sounds like I'm stalking you.
She was. That's fine. It's not stalking, it's fangirling, Liliana. Fangirling.
But I've been following you for a while. So because I was like, how do I came across? But it was through the publisher that I got to learn about you in the book context. That I was like, oh yeah, what you've been doing for us. You've been doing this for a while already, trying to make sense and organize it in a way that all of us who are working with this population have a common language. But also how do we organize it for clients? So you've been on it for a while already.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also even my own journey as a therapist and working with Latinas and Latinos and Latinx people, trying to understand how to present this to my clients in a way that is empowering
Yeah.
and helps them in their own journey. And I find that sometimes just having a name for something is so powerful, because it's not just this like mysterious feeling I'm having and I don't know where it comes from. But once I can say, like, for example, the twice as perfect, the mental health term for that is acculturative stress, right? Trying to balance two cultures at once creates acculturative stress. And so now I can actually name this as something, and there is power in that, right? It's now something I can grasp, or I can kind of hold on to and understand and be reflective of, or being able to name something as historical trauma or generational trauma, right? To create a bit of language around it so we can have more of these conversations and we can have more of these opportunities to talk and share our experiences, because we're not all experiencing them in the same way.
Yes.
But we are feeling elements of them as a collective.
Oh, love it. Music to my ears, right? Which is now you started naming the different kinds of not only traumas, but stress that Latinos are dealing with, and actually other cultures too. Instead of when we go to the DSM book, and it's like, can this fit the PTSD? Which is the umbrella for everything that you're just naming, and not having that common language just with every other therapist. Because if I say those terms, they'll be like, what are you talking about? Is that in the DSM book? Yet you have this ability in this book, again, to name a lot of these things.
Yeah, and provide those definitions. And so I'm hopeful that, just having that language in a sense is empowering to some people to be able to say, this is something that I can connect with and relate to.
Want to build community, right? I mean, that's one of the things that Liliana shared even just in the beginning of this, was like, oh, that spoke to my experience. It was nice to hear it, but it wasn't just me. I'm not the only one struggling with this or adjusting to this. And I can only imagine, I mean, we see this across our country, but communities are so, so important now for people, for individuals to find safety, to find healing, to find connection, in a world that, while we're connected through the internet, feels very disjointed and isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, Vanessa, is there a chapter that you were like, oh, this was either hard to write or one that you enjoyed the most?
Ooh, that's a great question. I will say a chapter that I found was hard to write, I think, was the chapter on historical trauma. It's just such a heavy topic.
Yeah.
And I wrote that chapter after I had written the chapters on colonization and the trauma of colonization. I had written the chapter on race and white supremacy culture. And so to come to the chapter of really talking directly about historical trauma and all that it entails, like it said, there's so much heaviness there. And also it was kind of putting all of that together of how does that live on today in our culture, in our communities, in our bodies. And so I found myself really taking time through that, because it is just a very big, pain for all of us to contend with. And so that's definitely where I noticed myself really having to take care and to kind of take that on the slower side. I had a lot of fun with a lot of the other chapters, right? The Twice as Perfect chapter that you talked about with the acculturative stress. I love writing about that because I find that that's really one of those things that people can really immediately attach to.
Yeah.
and not even just Latinos, right? But most people can they can reflect on some time where they could feel that kind of mismatch, even if it's just sometimes like you might switch jobs and you're going to a new job and the culture at this new job is very different from the one that you've come from, or
Yeah.
your family moves cities, right? And now you're in a very different type of environment than you were before. And so I've always loved that topic because I find it's really one that really brings people together right away. I actually was just doing my audiobook, and my director for my audiobook was an immigrant from New Zealand. And
Oh,
when we finished that chapter, he was like, wow, that's what I was feeling, acculturative stress. And he had questions for me about it, and we talked about it. And so I love that even he was able to connect. So that was another fun one. And then some of the later chapters where I talk about like when vivid and kind of having this radical imagination for liberation and what we want to create, I always really enjoy because that's part of like the art and the creativity of seeking liberation is what could be a world we would build outside of all of these systems and what would healing really look like. And
mm,
that's a really amazing exercise to be able to witness people take part in.
yeah, love it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I know today is launch day for you. Um, but what are you working on? What are you working on now?
What am
What's
I working
next?
on now?
Yeah.
Um, well, I really want to just kind of enjoy this book process and see what comes of it. I've really felt like there has been so much that's come into this, and it's been, I think, not even just a personal sacrifice, but like a family sacrifice, like with my husband's support to me as I wrote this book. So I'm happy to just kind of witness this book be out in the world and not just an idea in my head. And I am also expecting a baby in April. And so I'll be taking
Oh,
some time. And so this is really just a time for me to have, I was really hitting the gas pedal for a long time. And now I think I'm going to kind of just coast and see where life takes me for a bit.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you put one baby out into the world, you've got another one coming. I think it's fair to be able to enjoy that process.
Yeah. So I'm excited for just this next chapter and what it will bring. And I'm open to all of it.
Oh, love it. That's a nice affirmation. I am open, right,
Wow.
to for all of it. Oh God. Is there something that you wish you would have added now as you're reflecting, as you're doing the audio, that you're like, I wish I would have talked about this?
Mm, I don't know that there's like any big topic that I wish I would have added because I think this is something that I covered a lot of different stuff. I
Okay.
will just say now so much has happened since I turned in this original manuscript, right? So even though it's now going to be February 2025, this book has really been done for almost a year and just gone back and forth with the editing process. And so just now with everything that's happening in the United States with the political climate, and just the fear and uncertainty that we're all living with, I do sometimes think like, wow, I wish I could have spoken to some of this now more directly. But I don't know that any of us really could have anticipated that this is where we would find ourselves here at the beginning of 2025. um,
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is one of those, you put it out and then immediately the world continues and things continue to happen. I think it's the topic that will continuously be on the move and adjusting, and experiences will continue to happen, and
mhm,
policies will be created and adapted. And I think that this is going to become just a living document out there for
mhm,
people. It's not an end all point. I think the discussion about culture and generational trauma, colonization, there isn't just a one liner and then you know it, right? And it's never going to change. I think this is really important to keep in mind too, that this is going to be kind of a living document that continues to adapt and unravel as we experiences all the changes in the world that we have right now.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I am hopeful, right, that having a little bit of a foundation of historical trauma, generational trauma, individual trauma, culturative stress, that some of those things people will be able to say, well, I can kind of critically apply that to what I'm seeing now, or maybe have a little bit of a different lens that they can put towards some of what's happening. Because we really are being exposed to such high levels of stress right now. And I think that's on purpose right? It's by design that they're going to throw all of this negativity out and all of these wild policies out and hope to just put us into a space of shutting down. And perhaps if we understand what's happening, we can make more intentional decisions so that we can avoid feeling disconnected or shut down and have routes we can take to find agency and resource ourselves as needed and have a bit of space for ourselves to heal still.
Beautiful, beautiful stated. So again, everyone, this is a book that is released today. The Latin. Oh God, I cannot even pronounce it. The Latin Guide to Liberation. This is when I know that one, I hadn't had coffee. Two, my brain wants to switch to Spanish. Does that happen to you, Vanessa? When my brain is like, no, say it in Spanish.
Oh.
It just does this on me. So I'm like, oh God, what's going to happen?
You know what? No. So my first language was Spanish, and then I still speak some Spanish, and I am more fluent in English now over the years, which is something we talk about in the book too, about like how language changes over generations. But even like the idea of the word Latinx, we have to talk about in the book the history even of that, of why I would use it, because that has its own narrative, and there's a lot there too.
Oh, I think we can write a whole not even book, right, about labels when it comes to the labels that we're given here in the US. Because when you go to Latin America, either you're Mexican or you're Honduras, like you have this, you don't have all these things, with the exception of the US. So even as my brain was trying to reconcile that, because I was like, oh my God, what is it? But that's a whole new podcast that we can totally do. That's a whole new book just on labels that we're given when we are othering. But I'm so excited about your book. I'm so excited about everyone reading this book. I cannot say enough about it. I wish you so many blessings with this book. And again, thank you for writing it because we need it more than ever.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both for having me and giving me space to talk about it and to share that with your audience. I hope people find it to be helpful or maybe even empowering. And I have loved to talk to you both today.
Oh,
Thank you so much. We'll include all of your contact information and direct links so that they can purchase their own copy and put together their own book club and work through this very important text you put out.
thank you.
Till next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.